Oh, welcome to this VBA mini project where I'm going to show you how to make a simple VBA login form for Excel. And this is going to be a showcase of one of the many great things that you can do when you take my full VBA course. Now here, I'm going to show you how to make this from scratch, but the full course shows you so much more. So let's click the login button, and we have a nice little login form. Let's go Thanos for the username and a password login. We get a little success message box, login success, and it does something that we only want to allow somebody to be able to do or see if they have logged in. In this case, we're showing a hidden worksheet, but I'm going to show you in the tutorial how to make it do whatever you need to make it do. And the great thing about what I'm going to show you is that the user is currently logged in. It's not just a one-time thing. So if I click the protected action button down here, I'm going to show you how to make what's behind this. It tells you if the user is logged in or not. And you are logged in. And this feature allows you to have a nice little system for making lots of password protected actions, login protected actions, but you only have to log in once. And when we log out, we'll log out success. Notice that that worksheet hidden has been hidden. And if we go to protected action, you are not logged in. And another really great feature of this is that we are going to be managing the usernames and the passwords from within a separate admin worksheet that I'm also going to show you how to hide so a user can't access it. So you're not going to have some clunky backend with a bunch of hard-coded values and really clunky if statements checking every single username and then password. We're going to manage it nice, neat here in the worksheet. If you want to download this, click the link below the video. And if you want to learn how to do so much more in VBA, including how to change some of the more complex aspects of what I'm going to show you in this tutorial, check out my full VBA course. It takes you from beginner to expert. And if you are already taking that course, this is going to be a wonderful showcase of the skills that you are currently learning. Now let's go to a blank workbook and get started. First up, let us set up the workbook before we get to the code. We are going to have three worksheets here. One is going to be a kind of dashboard where we're going to put the buttons to control everything. And one will be for the usernames and anything else we want, an admin worksheet. And one will be just to show that we have logged in, we have done something. And let's go ahead and put hidden sheet up here so it's easier to see that we are on the hidden sheet when we look up here. And we'll get to admin in a moment. Let's go ahead and create our three buttons right now. And even though we're using buttons for this, once you learn more about VBA, you can have login and logout actions run automatically. So the user opens a workbook, they get logged in, logged out when they close the workbook. You can do so many great things. They're called events. And of course, I cover them in my full VBA course. So Control C, V, V. Now we have three buttons. And here we go. And let's click this guy, log in, and I'm going to go to the Home tab. And I'm going to try to not spend too much time on the basic stuff here. I'm just going to run you through how to make everything. All right, we have our three buttons, our hidden worksheet set up. Now let's go to the admin worksheet. And we're going to make a table here, not just username, password, but an actual table. It's going to make our life so much easier. So we can go up here, type username and password, and how about access notes? You might want to put what the user should have access to, what they should be able to do. You can put all sorts of useful things there. And let's click this, hit Control T, or go to Insert Table. And my table has headers. Okay. And let's go for some fun fictional characters. Thanos and Tyrell. And we'll put the passwords right here. And at the end, what we're going to do is to make this worksheet Excel very hidden so that you cannot unhide it by hand by right-clicking down here and going to Unhide. But if you wanted to, you could also store these in the VBA in the back end. I suggest using a constant for that, but there's all sorts of things you can do. Before we leave here, though, we want to name our table. It's going to make reading everything in our code so much nicer. So click in this guy and go to Table Design. Click in here and let's go for TBL, a prefix that means, well, table. And let's say access list, hit enter, and now we can use that in the code to refer to this table. And we are now ready to begin the coding. Hit Alt F11 to go to the VBA window, and let's go to Insert Module. Now we're going to have two different sort of sections here. One where we're going to handle everything that we want to do, logging in, logging out, checking it, and storing if the user is logged in or not, and then the form itself that allows us to log in. And we're going to build the form after we build the code that handles all of the logging in and logging out. And the first thing that I want to do here is to create the procedure, so the sub or the function that's going to allow us to actually log in. It is really going to be so simple. So let's call it sub, and how about a login status? All right, this guy's going to handle it. Now, what do I want to do here? In this tutorial, I'm going to show you how to break up your code, how to abstract it a bit. And that's going to make it much easier for you when you want to add additional features on top of this. So the only thing that I want this guy to do is to say, yes, you are logged in. No, you are not logged in. Now, think about how are we going to store if the user is logged in or not? There are a couple different ways to do it. But what I'm going to be doing here is to use a nice, simple global variable that can be accessed throughout the entire project. So let's call that guy public to make it global. We're putting it up here above all of the procedures, all the macros, all the functions. And we're going to call it is logged in status as, and it's Boolean, which is true or false. That means this guy can only hold true or false. And what I want to do is to set the status of this guy inside of this procedure. And I want to call this from other parts of the project. So we need to be able to give it a value to tell it, hey, I want to set this guy as logged in or logged out. So we need an argument. And let's set that guy to by val. If you don't know what that means, well, it basically just makes our code a bit more robust so that we're not going to be changing the value of any variables in the procedures that call this. Does that sound confusing? It's kind of confusing. If you want to learn more about it, of course, I talk about it in the full VBA course that I have, link in the description. So by val, let's call this one login status as Boolean. All right, so this guy's going to get fed login status. It's going to be true or false, and we can feed that directly to is logged in status. So let's do that right now. Control space to fill that in, equals login status. Now, one thing you may think is, hey, why don't I just access this guy directly throughout the entire project? Well, of course you can do that. But you might also want to have a few more things right here within set login status than just setting this to true or false. Maybe you want to log that the status is being changed, who is changing it, when it is being changed. There are all sorts of things you can do because you've contained it within its own little procedure instead of directly changing the variable. But now that we have something that's going to set the status, let's make something that's going to check the status for us. Of course, once again, you could check it directly, but I'm going to make a nice little function for it. So let's go function is logged in as, and it's going to be true, false once again. And it's a very simple function. So remember for functions, the name of the function and what you want it to equal, and that's going to output it. So is logged in status. And now we have two lower level procedures that are going to handle the actual changing of the status and the outputting of it, or the returning of it within the project. And let's make the actual sub that's going to do the login. Let's call it a login. I'm going to give it some space so we can center this guy. And what I want to do here is I want to be able to call this, and I want the user logged in. So I've already verified them. I want them logged in, and then whatever they should be presented with. So we want to unhide the hidden worksheet and send them there. Well, I want to be doing that here. And of course, you could build this out and make it so much more complex, but that's all we're going to be doing here. So let's set up a variable for that worksheet. It's a little bit overkill in this tiny procedure, but in the real world, you're probably going to be adding a lot more than just these few lines of code. So dim ws hidden for worksheet. That's what the ws stands for. You do not need that prefix though. Dim ws hidden as worksheet, and let's set it equal to worksheets hidden. Okay. And before we actually do anything in this procedure, I'm going to go ahead, because here we've just set some variables, I'm going to go ahead and set the login status to true, because you may have an automated macro that's going to run when the user goes here that checks if they're actually logged in or not. So let's be a little careful. Set a login status space, and it's true or false. We set that guy to true. So login status, remember, this guy right here. So now the user is logged in. Let's go ahead and send them to the worksheet. First, let's make it so it's visible. wshidden.visible equals Excel sheet visible. And how about we send them there so they can see it. And let's let them know a login success. All right, and that is all that we are going to be doing for the login macro. Now, we're going to create a log out macro that's basically going to be the reverse of this. So sub log out. And why don't I just copy all of this? Be very, very careful with copy pasting. Let's go over every line. Okay, worksheet, login status, false. That is what actually logs the user out. And what I'm going to do here is to put that at the end before the message. So let's do all the cleanup that we need to do now that we are logging the user out. And then let's change their status. So hidden.visible equals, and we want Excel sheet very hidden. That's what prevents a user from right-clicking the tab and making it visible. So we no longer will be selecting that. And log out success. All right, we have a login, we have a log out. And now let's create our check. Is the user logged in or not? Can they do this action or not? So let's create another procedure down here. And this is the procedure, by the way, what I'm about to make, that will be attached to the protected action button. It's completely optional. All it does here is show you how to build a framework to check if the user's logged in or not. So we're going to call that guy protected action. Give it some space to get it on the screen. And all we have to do now is go to our function that does all the checking for us. Is logged in. It returns true or false directly, so we can include it in an if statement. It's going to make our life so easy. All we do, if is logged in, then else, and if. That's it. And if you are here, you're logged in. And if you are here, you are logged out. And all we want to do here is a simple message box just to show you that you're logged in or not. You are logged in. And down here, message box. You are not logged in. But in the real world, what you're probably going to be doing down here and here is to call other procedures. So this protected action could be anything. It could be export a CSV, send an email to all the salesmen, and you want to make sure that that action is only going to be called in here that makes sure that the user is actually logged in or has entered the correct password. And at this point, we have all of the helper procedures that we require. Well, except for one that we add after we add the form. And it's time to make it so we have a nice easy way to log the user in, because here we haven't checked anything. We haven't verified anything. We're going to do the verification separately. So let's go ahead and add the form for that. Insert, user form, and let us make a few nice little controls. One for the label, Control C, Control V. So we're going to have two labels, username and password. And click in here. Let's go for the text boxes. So click 1 and click 2, and two buttons, one for cancel and one for login. All right, now, one of the first things that I teach you in the course when you're building these guys, rename everything. There I take a lot more time to explain it, so we rename it before adding all the controls. But here, let's start with renaming the form. It's going to make it much easier to access in your code. So click the form, then go down here to the properties window. If you don't see that, go to a view, and you have properties window and project explorer. You want to view both of those guys. This is the Project Explorer, by the way. So go here to name, and for the form, let's change it to FRM, a login, enter, and go down to the caption, a login. Notice it says a login right here now. And let's go to label 1. It's not very important to rename this right now, but let's go for it anyway. LBL and user name. And the caption will be username. And down here we have LBL password and password. And right here for the username, that's going to be TXT. Username, enter. And this guy is going to be TXT. Password, enter, and this is going to be for the password input. So let us go down to password char. Where are you? Right there. And click in there and type the character that you want to appear when the user is inputting the password. I'm going to use the asterisk right there, or the multiplication sign on the keyboard. And let's go to the buttons now. Click this guy. It's going to be the cancel button, CMD, cancel. And right here, cancel. And this guy is going to be, all right, double click, CMD, a login. And for the caption, a login. All right, we can spend ages getting this guy to look perfect, but I'm not going to spend so much time rearranging these guys. My tip is to select these controls, click in here and hold, and drag to select multiple controls, and to position them, go to the Format tab right here, or the Format menu option, and you have many choices. Play around with these. You can spend a very long time doing it, but it's going to help you to make sure everything is lined up correctly. So we've got our basic form now. If I click it and hit play, we can see it looks pretty much okay enough. And let's close that and add some code. Let's go for the easy code first. Double click the cancel button, and how about unload me? Now we have a working cancel button. We can click it and the form will be closed. If you don't know what me means, well, we're inside of a form, so you can use the word me to refer to the form. Kind of a confusing concept the first time that you hear it, but it can be quite useful. Now let's double click this guy to go back here. And also, if you want to get to the code window again without double clicking anything, right click this guy and go to view code. But let's go back here. We are pretty much done with everything except for the login button. So actually, let's go back to the code window by double clicking the login button, which is going to take us into the click event for that button. So when you click that button, what happens? Same thing that we just did for the cancel button, except for I didn't explain it when we got there. So what do we want to do when you click the login button? Well, we want to get the username and the password that were input and check them and make sure that they are correct. And it seems simple enough. And if you wanted to, you could just make a series of if statements. That will work, but it's not very robust and it's not so easy to update and maintain in the future. So let's make a nice, simple, nice little system for checking this. First up, let's create a bunch of variables. We're going to need one for the admin worksheet so that we can reference that. So ws admin as a worksheet, and let's give it some space. And let's create variables to hold the input and then to hold the checks or the results of checking that input. So input username as a string and input password as string because they're going to be inputting text. And that works the same if they're going to be inputting numbers for our purposes here. And let's go user lookup a result as a variant. This is going to be quite interesting what we do here. We're going to use an actual VLOOKUP here in the code. And these two variables are going to store the results of that VLOOKUP. Pass lookup result as a variant. One thing I say a lot in the VBA course, and it really does hold true, there are about a million different ways to do everything. And what I'm going to show you here should be rather interesting. Let's go ahead and set the admin worksheet equal to worksheets admin. And let's get the inputs from the user now. Input username. Do you know how to get an input from a text input in a user form? It's so easy. Input the name of it. And since we gave both of those inputs a txt prefix, if we forget what it is, type txt, hit control space, and it will give you all the matching options. We want username. What do we want? We want the value from it. Input password equals txt password dot value. And now that we have the inputs comes the interesting part. How are we going to check them? Well, what we are going to do here is we are going to reference the admin worksheet and then reference this table and reference this range right here. Then we're going to use a VLOOKUP to try and look for the username and the password. And if we get a match, then we can proceed to check if the password is correct or not. So we go user lookup result, and that's going to equal application dot VLOOKUP. It's not going to fill in here because we are doing this in a kind of nice little way that makes it so that if we use this worksheet function and get an error in our code, it's not going to blow everything up. So application dot VLOOKUP, and what do we want to look for? Let's look for the input username. Where do we want to look for it? A table on the admin worksheet. And tables belong to worksheets, so ws admin. What is a table? It's a list object. It can be kind of confusing to remember that. Now we give the name of our table. It begins with TBL and is access a list. And what do we want? Well, we only want the range where all the data is. I don't want the headers included. So we go for data body range. And we feed the range directly into the VLOOKUP function here in the VBA window. Now, how about the next argument? Which column? Let's get the value from the first column and false for an exact match. And I'm going to go ahead, shift home to select all of that and copy it. And let's paste it in and make the required changes, first of which is this. So for the next one, here we're going to have the lookup result for the username. Let's do the same thing for the password. So pass lookup result, but I want to use the input username as the lookup value still. However, I want to go for column 2. And what this is going to do, since we made it this way using application.vlookup, and we made these guys a variance up here, is it's going to store any errors in the variant variable. And we just check if we have an error or not. That's how we find out if we have a match. So let's go like this. If not is error, user lookup result, and not is error, pass lookup result, then else, and if. And if we are down here, we for sure have a bad login. So let's just do that. Login failed. If we are here, it means that our VLOOKUPs, both of these, did not return an error. Since we don't have an error, let's go ahead and check if the password is correct or not, because it means we have a password value for the correct user name. So if pass lookup result equals input password, then else and if. And this is where I'm showing you how to use a kind of interesting way to do this, which is the Vlookup. Because you could use arrays for this, you could loop through the rows individually for this, you could do so many things. But I think the Vlookup worksheet function is kind of an interesting way to do it. Now, if we get here, the password that we looked up, so the one in the admin worksheet, is the same as the password that was input. And this password is the password that was provided for the username that we are certain we found a match for in the admin table, because there's no error for that return value right here. What I'm trying to say is if you're here, you're logged in. So now all we have to do is to actually log in the user. And we have a very simple way to do that. Call the login method, the login procedure. And since we have it in its own self-contained sub in the other module, that's all we have to do here. We are done. But down here, this means the password was input incorrect and the user is not logged in. So we can go ahead and put bad login once again. And message box, login failed. And once we are done with that, let's go ahead and just close this user form. So unload me. There's that me keyword again. And we can remove the extra spacing. And there we go. But the last thing is, how do we actually show the user form? So if we go in here and we click it, we can hit play and show it, but that's not very user friendly. So let's go back to module 1 and go to the bottom and make a nice little macro called login form show. And how do we show any user form? So easy. The name of it dot show. And do you remember the name of the user form? If not, don't worry because you started its name with FRM. So you type that in, control space, and there we go, login. And we want to show that guy. And that is it. We are completely 100% done. Well, almost 97%. Let's go ahead and test everything, and then let's lock up the project so the user can't see it and hide the admin worksheet. So we go back to the dashboard, Alt F11 to get back to the worksheet. And let's go right click and assign a macro. And I'm going to change this from all open workbooks to this workbook. And we have a login form show. Okay. And right click, assign macro. Log out. Okay. Right click, assign macro. Protected action. Okay. Now we already have the hidden worksheet visible down here, so let's log out first. And at this point, all it's really going to do is to hide that worksheet because we haven't logged in to begin with anyway. So a log out success. The worksheet is gone. All right, now let's go ahead and log in. Username, Thanos, tab, and input the password. And actually, let's input the incorrect one first. Login. Login failed. Okay. And a no hidden worksheet. Very good. Let's check if we are actually logged in or not. Protected action. You are not logged in. Perfect. Login. Let's go for Tyrell this time. And 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Login. Login success. Hit OK. We're on hidden worksheet. Everything seems to be good. Let's go back to the dashboard. You are logged in. Perfect. And we go for a log out success, and hidden is gone. Now let's go ahead and password protect the project to keep everything safe and get the admin worksheet out of there. So for the admin worksheet, we want to make sure that this is safe, but you don't just want to right click this guy and click hide. Looks like it's gone, but it's not because we can right click and unhide. The options are off the screen right now, but right click the tabs and you're going to see them. And you can click unhide and admin. So what you want to do is Alt F11 to go back to the VBA window and click the admin worksheet and then go down here to visible. Excel sheet visible, click that guy once, click the drop down arrow, and set it to Excel sheet very hidden. That's how we can do that by hand. And when we go back here, it is gone. And if you right click, you cannot click unhide. Or if you have other hidden worksheets that were hidden that way, you aren't going to be able to view the Excel sheet very hidden worksheets that way. So that's how you do it by hand without any VBA code. And for the project itself, go ahead and right click, VBA project properties, protection, a lock project for viewing, and input a password. And you hit OK. And when you close and reopen it, it's going to look like this. And if you want to expand that, you need the password for it. So that's how you can protect everything back there and make it so the user can't unhide the admin worksheet by hand or the hidden worksheet, and keep everything safe up here. Now, one thing to mention before we go is that global variables were used here to track if the user was logged in or not. And depending on how you set things up, you could have issues with that. If you have issues with that, you could also just track the user's logged in status within the admin worksheet. So if we go back here, open this guy up, go to admin, make it visible again, click down here, Excel sheet visible. You could have another column over here that would be something like logged in or not, and then store the status for the user there. So if global variables are causing you trouble, then go ahead, store it in the worksheet, but make sure this guy is safely locked away. Excel sheet, very hidden, and the project as well, password protected. And if you want to learn only about a million other things that you can do to make this login system so much more robust and better, and to better understand everything that I covered here, then go ahead and take my Excel VBA from beginner to expert course. It's got something in there for everyone who is a complete beginner, everyone who is just knows a little bit, and all the way up to those of you who are intermediate level. There are a lot of interesting things covered in the course. Pretty much everyone can get something out of it. But for this tutorial, making a simple VBA login form for Excel, that's it.